Last night's dream was just as bad as the one before. I walked the familiar halls of Hargrave House, watching the beautiful phantasm as she moved through her life within these halls. Marguerite was there too, her ghost also going about her day-to-day life. But she was joined by Venus as she moved about the living room in this dress or that jumper, descending the stairs for a dance or coming down in a hurry as if to beat someone that I couldn't see. She had lived here, loved here, been loved here, and was now imprisoned here forever. As I stood on the stairs, I could see her and Marguerite sitting in the living room, talking to each other in their funeral finery. "I cannot stay here," Venus said, looking affronted that they would even ask. "My life is in Europe, in Paris, in Germany, on the catwalks, on the streets of Moscow, not in this nowhere place. I cannot stay here. How could you even suggest such a thing?" There was silence for a moment, Venus sitting as she looked at the empty furniture around her. Clearly her family was answering her, ghosts I hadn't met yet, giving their own excuses. Marguerite was by the window, blowing smoke into the air as she looked at something outside, and when she turned back, I heard her raise her voice, and the sound of it made my skin crawl. It reminded me of the voice I had heard from that bleeding corpse in the art studio a couple of nights ago, the one who had welcomed me to the family. "My studio is in New York, V, as you are very aware of. I can no more move my studio out here than you can convince your modeling agency to come to the middle of nowhere." Venus looked at her as she spoke, a look of distaste working its way across her beautiful face. "Those things are terrible for your complexion, Marguerite. You keep smoking like that, and you'll be old before your time." "Not all of us are as worried about our looks as you are, V." "Maybe you should be," she shot back, the image deteriorating, which I took as my cue to move upstairs. I could hear the screaming before I came fully up the grand staircase, and it turned my feet to lead as I came down the hallway. Her feet were heavy too as she ran around the room, screaming as she bumped into those reflective walls. The story had said that John Jr. had needed to kick the door down to get to her, but I found it unlocked when I turned the handle. There she was, huddled in a corner, the blood already running down her face as she tore at her cheeks with her long nails. In the mirror, I saw her own deformed selves as they gathered against the glass. Each of them were her, but their faces, their arms, their legs, their naked bodies were each deformed with growths and tumors. Some of their bulges oozed with pus, and others simply wept with liquid all their own. They clawed at the mirrors, trying to get out, and Venus cowered as she screamed at them to get away. I had to look away when she tore her eyes out, and the scream was so loud, I expected to find blood coming out of my ears when I finally shook myself awake. I ate toast again, my stomach still in an uproar. I should be hungry, but I can't find it in me to eat. I haven't showered in 2 days, and I've become able to smell myself. I reek, and it's becoming a problem. I'm afraid to sit on things because I might leave that smell on them. But rather than stop to do laundry and wash, I'm pressing on. I don't know why. I didn't receive any directions this morning, but I want to see Jasper's room today. If John Jr. was the great detective his brother wrote him to be, then he was surely taken out last. So I took a right and went to the second door on the hallway, which led to Jasper's room. Jasper's room was odd. The walls were covered in the same paper I'd found in Marguerite's room and the room downstairs, but there was a foam stuck to it as well to dampen the surfaces from bouncing back sound. Simple foam squares of varying thickness, long strips of tape that had likely held something in place, and even a few sections of metal that had been stuck up with screws and adhesives. Jasper was interested in experimenting with different sounds, it seems. His room was less bare than the others, and that struck me as odd. All the other rooms had been gutted, like the Grinch in Whoville, and this one still had a lot of furniture in it. The bed still had its mattress, There was a nightstand, a desk, posters on the wall, and some hangers I'd thought must be for guitars. The foam on the wall was falling apart, but it was still there, and that made me even more curious. How could he have written beneath the paper in here? There were things on the walls, held on by more than just screws and glue. Those guitar hangers were likely screwed into the stud. There would be no way he could have done it without... I don't know. But as I started peeling back the paper, I could already see the words beneath it. It took some doing, but I got all the screws out of the guitar holders and removed them from the wall. All the furniture was piled in the middle of the floor, another room with hardwood that wouldn't require a lot of decarpeting. With that done, I came to the wallpaper. As it came down, I saw the words beneath it. They were there, spread out in the same spiraling layout that the other three had been in, and I was still as amazed by them as I had been the first time. It was so high on the wall that it seemed like it should be impossible. How would someone do this? He wrote their stories and then he covered them with wallpaper or mirrors or whatever. Why would he do this? He was gloating, wasn't he? Was he keeping some kind of record, maybe? What was he planning and why? I didn't know, but I knew where I would get my answers. Jasper Hargrave, the second son of John and Melissa Hargrave. Jasper came into this world to the sound of music, and it created in him a love that lasted his whole life. Jasper searched for music from his earliest days. At least that's what Father always said. Jasper would seek out music within the household, going to the radio or showing excitement when their walks took them past an orchestra or a street performer. He began making his own music at a young age, and Father always spoke of looking up from his paper to find him banging on a toy or testing the sounds they made when struck. Father was amazed by him, and when he showed interest in instruments, Father got him a guitar and lessons and everything that he would need. Jasper started playing his acoustic when he was 5, having to wait until he was big enough to hold it properly. His instructor said that he had never had a student who took to the instrument as quickly and as completely as Jasper. He had to ask our father if he was sure that his 5-year-old had never had a lesson before, because the things he was doing after a week of lessons were unprecedented. Jasper was moved up quickly in lessons, soon growing past what the instructors could teach him. Once he felt that his grasp of the guitar was as good as it could be, he took up other instruments too. Drums, woodwinds, brass, piano, xylophone. There was nothing he couldn't play. Jasper wowed his band teachers, never failing to secure a solo in the seasonal performance the school put on. And he was in multiple smaller bands as well, where he won year after year of the local Battle of the Bands. Music was his life, and it seemed to be all he cared about, all that drove him. He was not a gifted student, but he saw no reason to be. Jasper was someone who would never need school to succeed, and despite our parents' objections, he left home early with his first band. His first, but not his last. Jasper went on tour with multiple bands, playing bass guitar in this band, drums in another, lead guitar in a third, and vocals in another. He wrote music, experimented with sound, and became an innovator in the field. He moved beyond the little boy with the acoustic guitar and became a musical genius a few short years later. He was touring Europe when our father died, and he was the last to arrive at the house, coming in the night before the funeral. He was so different then than the 17-year-old who had left home all those years ago with just his guitar case and a lot of big ideas. He had been home since, but never for long, and never because he wanted to. Jasper came home because otherwise he would have to content himself with being mediocre, and he couldn't stand that. Jasper had to be the best, and I suppose we all did. I always looked forward to his return. Persephone, too. The three of us had always been close, and we had kept in touch after Father and Mother had made their displeasure with him known. Many evenings, when we were still in school, Jasper and Persephone and I, and sometimes Venus, would sit in the gardens and have a drink or two. Jasper would play sometimes, and we would sit under the stars and just exist. When Jasper played, it was easy to forget that you were a genius or a gifted individual. When he played, we were all just people. After the funeral, he acted affronted that we thought he would stay. He was a child of the world, and he could not rob them of his star. He was working with a new method of sound amplification, and as little as I understood about it, I understood it was as volatile as it was ingenious. He was trying to get other musicians to use these new means of amplification, something that would provide a less electronic sound like you got from a regular speaker, and he was anxious to get back out and onto the scene. He was willing to take a chance of losing his gift, content with the fact that he could live off the residuals of his new invention for the rest of his life. As he had said, though, it was very volatile. It wasn't hard to tamper with his work. The hardest part was catching him out of his room. After Venus, he and John Jr. had become very suspicious of Persephone and I. I think they believed she might be the one killing off her siblings, and who could blame them? I'd been very careful to use things that would make them believe it had been her. The plant compound that killed Marguerite, the hallucinogens that had caused Venus to end her life, and now Jasper's sound device. That one may have been the one to tip my hand, however. John Jr. had seen me sitting and listening to Jasper on several occasions as he talked and talked and talked about this thing. By the time I killed him, I felt like I could have invented one of my own. The problem, as he explained it, was that if the frequency was set too high, it could cause irreparable hearing damage. So I tuned the frequency up, tampered with the wiring so that he wouldn't notice. The noise from his room covered the yelling that followed, but not the gunshot. He barricaded himself inside, yelling and stomping around as he raged at who knows what. I guess it blew his eardrums out. I never had him checked, but the gunshot a few hours later sealed his fate. It was a shame. Jasper and I were always close. He had kept in touch after he left the house, and I had even written a few things for his band when they needed a press release or a pitch write-up. He was the closest thing I ever had to a friend, he and Persephone, but the patron was very clear. If I wanted to keep what the house had given me, they had to pay for their crimes. It was night again when I finished. I'm tired. So tired. This house seems to be taking more than I bargained for. I don't know if I can finish what I meant to do here, but I have to know the end. It's not about my dreams anymore. At this point, I need closure, to know how it ended. I'll update you all tomorrow. I have another ghost story to get to, but I suppose at least it will have a musical accompaniment tonight. You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story, or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad, Unicorn Hollow, and Army Dude for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Janet, Lee Kendall, Saikat, Ronda J, Sue Casper, and Valinator for being our spooky skeleton contributors. And thanks to Oh Snap, Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Stephanie Carrington, Tyler Parker, Cinnamon Fox, Grim Reaper, TomBoiTopUwU, and Queen Sheebah for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. And a big thanks to Scott Donahue for being our ghostly writer tier contributor. Thanks everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you'd like to support the channel, then come on down to Patreon or become a member on YouTube. Spooky Skeleton tier contributors, that's our $5 tier, get their spooky 12 hours early at 8:30 a.m. as opposed to 8:30 p.m. My time, of course. And while Ghostly Reading is only a tier that's available on Patreon, you get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one on your doorstep in, hopefully, a timely manner. If you'd like a book, we have many on Amazon. I've got links below if you'd like to follow those. Should get you to my page so you can buy any one of my 8 books I believe we're up to now. I'm sure they'd look really nice on your shelf, and I'll sign them for you if you can find me out in the wild. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.